So welcome to our first every third Tuesday where we plan, and that's not every third Tuesday of the year, that's every third Tuesday of the month. We will do a mini deep dive on a particular topic. Today it's attestation. We'll do a few updates and things, and then right after that, we will do a Q&A session as needed. So without further ado, on attestation, we have got a simple version of attestation that's been around for some time, and we have just added a more detailed or a more advanced version of attestation. And Jonathan, if you could take us through that demo, that would be great. And today's session is recorded and will be available for everybody to look at later. Jonathan.
So this is the technology piece of our website. Up here at the top, technology, and then we're under the kiosk screen configuration and compliance. So what we're going to show you is just a brief highlight of what we've done. Before, we had this very basic item where you could customize questions. Everyone had to click a checkbox, and then you could register your punch. It was very simple. It accomplished the goal. But all the partners have started to go, hey, our clients need some additional functionality when it comes to compliance or attestation. So our new option that we have now is you have the ability to use yes or no check options instead of just check boxes. And you can specify what the answers will be. So you can say question number 1 can be yes, and 2 is no, and 3 is no. You can say they all can be yes, they can all be no, or you can leave them unrestricted and actually just get an answer from the employee and take the punch no matter what, so where you don't actually restrict them. So I'm going to walk you through this real quick. There's nothing fancy here. I just wanted to show you a little bit of what it looks like and then also how the configuration functions. So first thing that I wanted to show you was going to be if we were going to set up the iPad to essentially have all the answers be no. So under your access point type, I've made a new compliance here, compliance with yes or no. The way that you configure that is in the same style. It's going to be a clock, except now you say it's going to be yes or no versus a checkbox. So in this first scenario, I'm saying I want all the answers to be no in order for this to work correctly. And you still have your same options that you had before. You know, policy 1, do you want it to show up always, once, you know, randomly, however you want them to show up. Those features are still there. It's just now we offer some different options on the questions. So let me show you what that looks like on the iPad. So we'll let it grab its config. Sorry, disconnected. There we are. Okay, so here's the yes or no questions. We can pick a different face since I look very unhappy for some reason. Anyways, so they can answer questions to whatever, and you'll see that the button doesn't come up because we specified they have to all say no. So it doesn't matter what they pick until they select no on everything. Then it will allow them to register the punch. Let me go ahead and clock back out. And we're going to modify that to be a different option for you. Okay, so if we wanted to go something where we wanted to specify they have to answer yes, no, yes, then we can throw that in there. Same kind of thing, right? Just the order of the questions and how you want it to be answered. So this is what that looks like on the iPad. So in this scenario, I have to answer yes, no, yes. Again, nothing critical there. And I want to show you the other option of where you don't specify any answers, and that way you can just select, just allow the employee to answer whatever they need to. Let me show you what that looks like. So let's say you're having a problem with an employee at work today because he decided to come to work drunk. We're going to actually select that. and it'll still accept that answer and let them register the punch. But now you would have it documented that they've actually registered or answered in that way. So there's that. What I wanted to show you on that, and I'll come to show you what that looks like on the back end, but I also wanted to show you, because with the compliance, we would recommend that you guys keep those offline, essentially in an Excel sheet or something, of what questions are and when you update them. But if you don't want to do it that way and you want to provide additional questions over time, then you can continue to just add in additional questions. So here's another one. We're going to add in a fourth question, but I no longer want to ask them the first question. So I'm just going to set this to none. And we'll update it. So taking off the first question, adding in the test question. Okay. And I'll show you what that looks like on the iPad. Okay, so now I've missed the first question about drugs and alcohol, and now I have the test question. And it registered my punch. So let me show you what that actually looks like in the events, so you can see what's happening and how that, what the difference is on how they work. Okay, so here was the first attestation where I basically said you had to answer all no. And so what it's saying is it asked these three questions, okay, policy 1, 2, and 3. It doesn't tell you how they answered, and the reason why is because everything was set to no, so you already know the answer is no, otherwise this punch wouldn't have been able to be accepted. Same thing with this punch, okay, where we specified it's a yes, no, yes, or whatever order you want them to be in. It's a forced answer, or you can't register the punch. So again, you got this same type of information. You'll notice here that in the third and fourth one, we didn't specify what the answers had to be, but you can see that for policy 1, they answered yes, 2, no, 3, no. And then this last one, you'll see that policy 1's not even on there because I told it not to display, but I did tell it to add policy 4, and that was a yes, yes, yes. So over time within the configuration, you can keep all those questions and policies. You don't actually have to remove them. It's not going to mess anything up. Or you can keep them in a spreadsheet or whatnot over time if you're going to be changing them. That way, if you have to go back and look at, okay, on February 12th, someone answered yes to question 2, and you can see what question 2 was on February 12th. That way you know if there's some sort of legal related issue. So that's the current improvements that's here. You have the ability to do yes, no. You can still customize your questions. You can still force the answers, but now you can have flexibility on what the answers can be. Or you cannot force any answers and actually register what was how they answered that day. The other option that we've added to this, if you specify a user type, then you can have the clock function. So say you were going to have office workers and then also warehouse workers. In the warehouse, you needed to have, safety equipment. So in the office, you don't need to have safety equipment. So you just want this to function as a clock and don't provide any attestation questions. Not a problem. You just say user type warehouse worker, and the warehouse workers will be the only ones that get the attestation questions. So I have, do you have your safety gear? Do you have this or whatever? Whatever those need to be. And then we have some examples of what these actually look like in this scenario. And when I mentioned user type, that is a section of the user. So I'll show you. This at this time, this currently has to be manually set. But we'll be able to change that over time. So this user type is what I'm talking about. So if this said warehouse and I had them set up to only ask attestation questions to the warehouse, then that's only those workers would get it. No one else would. So that's the current attestation setup there. Let me, and I showed you the events. That's essentially the basic changes that we've had. Nothing too complicated, but we've given you some additional flexibility for some of your clients. And we will continue to have new improvements upon that throughout the rest of the year. But we're adding these in as fast as we can to give you some additional flexibility for your customers.
Is that clear? Does anybody have any questions on the attestation that Jonathan just showed?
Nothing on what he just showed, but I'm just curious if you do have any plans that in the distant future to tie it in with the attestation in Workforce Ready or UKG Ready.
Yeah.
So
when I spoke to John, he's currently investigating that and seeing what the possibilities are. So I don't have a valid answer for you yet. I know that he's looking into it to see what the options are with that.
With the API, I mean, you can only use whatever the API provides. So.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So now what we wanted to do is to just give you a few quick updates, things that have happened. And in fact, this slide an hour or so ago said group punching is coming, and yet overnight on version 10.0, group punching actually was installed and it is working. We are not planning to go through group punching today in detail. We can easily set up a call, you know, as soon as you want to go through group punching. But the good news is group punching is now available on NoahFace. As I say, we can do a session on that. A couple of other things that have already also happened recently. You may have even noticed when Jonathan was doing that demo that there is now a clock that is on the front on the iPad. If you want to specify that, he'll take you through that. We've improved the error messages so that when an error message comes through from Kronos, we now have more detail on what is going wrong. And then Jonathan's now going to take us through a couple of other TNA changes in terms of breaks and signing in and out, and customized consent at the time that you are giving people the consent form right up front. So Jonathan, if you could take us through those things, please.
No problem. Okay, so one of the things that we ran across, and we found it interesting that it wasn't already in the software, was the time clock did not tell you what time it thought it was. So now you'll see that we have the time that's displayed on the actual clock, on the clock itself. And you have three options of where you want to locate that. So under the settings on the iPad, under options here, you have a new feature called clock position. And you can put it at the top, center, bottom, or you can turn it off. So if we change it to the bottom, you can see it relocates. So purely wherever it makes sense for the customer logo. Depending on how big the logo is, you may need to tweak the size of it to make the clock, look correct. But you now have that feature on the clock. So if you've got some strict timesheet requirements, so employees can only clock in up to 3 minutes before their shift starts, now they'll know exactly what time NoahFace thinks it is. So they're not sitting there trying to clock in 4 times in a row before it finally is 3 minutes before their shift. So that's a new simple thing. It will stay turned off by default. You will have to go enable that on each iPad in the options for now. So that is that. The other piece that I wanted to show you was we've had improved error messages. So the APIs used to dump out, if you had an error message that showed up in the events, you would get an error code of 18900, which if you look that up on their website, gave you an error message of %S, which means nothing. So it was very difficult to go figure out, okay, why didn't Workforce Ready accept the punch from NoahFace? They now have updated the API to where it's actually returning valid error codes. So you'll now get an error message, and this will be very helpful on deployments and then troubleshooting anything random that's going on, where it'll say, okay, this was a duplicate punch, or employee has the wrong timesheet type associated. They'll actually give you a real error message that you can see. The other piece that's coming out of that, of when you have an error, and these will end up showing up in this blank space, is you have the ability to just retry or clear an error on a single event, not necessarily for all errors. So if you just had one problem that you were trying to fix, you can go then retry that after you've adjusted their timesheet, and it will sync that one punch over. So we're adding some additional flexibility on some of that troubleshooting, some of those troubleshooting items. The next piece that I wanted to cover with you is the time and attendance changes that we've had. So California clients have restrictions on usually the employees have to take a 30-minute break for lunch. So we now have that option specified in here. You can adjust this number to be whatever you need it to be, 15 minutes, 1 hour, whatever it needs to be. But essentially what NoahFace does is it says, okay, I just registered an out punch. I'm not going to allow them to do an in punch until they've met this requirement. So if they try to clock in before that time period, they'll receive an error message like this that says the minimum break time is 30 minutes. You can clock in again at 8:17. Now they know what time the clock thinks it is, so they'll be able to come back and clock in at their appropriate time. So that's a nice one. Go ahead.
I've wanted Kronos to add that for 15 years, and they haven't. To say when you can clock back in.
Yeah, well, we get it in 15 days, so we are. Right.
Okay, the next thing that we have, before the solution, if you clocked in on, let's say you deployed 6 iPads to a site. If you clocked in on iPad 1, then you needed to clock back out on iPad 1. Now we have a new feature also in here where it will share the punches between the iPads. So if you're in a warehouse scenario, again, where you've got 100 people going in and out on shift, you may have 2 or 3 iPads all set up on the wall so they can all punch in and out very quickly. Well, who's going to remember which iPad they walked up to at the beginning of the day? Also, why make them remember which iPad they clocked into? It doesn't really matter. So now what happens is the iPads will take the event. So if I go in on iPad A and then I want to go clock out on iPad B, those events get synced up to the cloud and then again back down to all the other iPads, so they'll be able to process that. That came out to be very helpful for a client that was they bought some thermal units. So they wanted to force everyone to be able to clock in the morning on the thermal units, and then through the rest of the day, use all their regular iPads throughout the facility. So this allowed them to be able to share and keep the punches in sync everywhere.
Jonathan, if I may interrupt, just a little bit more detail on this because I think it's an interesting case study. This particular client has a total of 4 iPads. 2 are thermal and 2 are non-thermal. And when we put NoahFace in, the location of the clocks, the physical location of the clocks was changed. So there was a couple of behavior changes that needed to go on with these staff. And one thing that the client wanted to do was to make sure that everybody had their temperature checked at the beginning of the day. So what we did is we made the 2 non-thermal clocks. We changed the rules so that you could not use those clocks before 9 in the morning, and everyone in this factory clocks in between about 6 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. So the only 2 places you could clock in were thermal clocks, no problem. And then when you went and took your break or took your lunch later in the day or left the building, you could leave through any thing. So we got people to change their physical behavior and ensure that they got their temperatures checked. So that was just an example. So thanks. Sorry for interrupting.
No problem. So that's what share equals true means. It will share with the iPads. And then it also has an item here for 5. And again, this is adjustable, but it allows the clock to, if there's suddenly a network issue and it can't sync and pick up the details from the other clocks, this number will say, okay, after that many seconds, go back to manual clocking. So that way the clocks still can operate offline. So you'll still get a punch. It may not match correctly on the timesheet at that point because their network went offline, but at least you collected it and it showed up in Workforce Ready, and then you can make that adjustment. You didn't have to worry about the time clocks not actually registering anything. The last piece that I wanted to show you was when you go to the iPad and you're going to register for the first time, if you're using facial recognition, it just says NoahFace uses facial. If you have thermal, it also adds in the thermal. But you have the ability to customize this 3rd paragraph. So if they have some local jurisdiction things where they have to put in some exact language to match their compliance requirements, that is where you can do that. So let me show you what that looks like. You can see where you can customize this part of the consent page. So they can add in whatever language they need to meet their specific requirements. It's a very simple thing. Essentially, you just take the privacy statement and throw it in the clock config. So I'll show you that real quick. That's right. So it's just another setting. So I had this one set up basic, do no touch, set a max shift of 12 hours. And then I said, okay, give me my customized privacy statement. So this can get thrown in any of those for whatever that customer specifically needs. The last piece that we were going to touch on is group punching. Thank you, Michael. You provided some very good and positive insight on some of those items. We didn't anticipate it being ready today, but it is ready, and we are going to cover that in our meeting next month. So we'll show you some of the specifics on how that will work. And there will be some continuous improvement to the group punch functionality from what we have even now. That'll continue to be improved upon.
So just a couple of other quick topics that I wanted to cover. And these are just FYIs as much as anything. The first one is to do with data privacy and security. We have created a small document that I'll send to everybody, and it just really says the following. It says that all over the United States, there are different laws and different requirements to do with privacy, data collection, biometrics, temperature, all of this stuff. And it does vary state by state. And particularly, we've seen in the last 12 months that there seems to be more and more activity going on in various states. So the first thing this document says is this is not a legal document. This does not solve all your problems. This says you guys need to check what your local requirements are, whether you're operating in the state of California versus Texas, et cetera, et cetera. However, what our investigation has found is that there seems to be 5 recurring themes that are going on to do with consent, retention, security, storage, and options. And what NoahFace is, as you're aware, is NoahFace is a highly configurable piece of software that can assist in you being able to deliver against your local state requirements. So for example, on notice and consent, NoahFace has a configurable enrollment screen, as Jonathan just shows you, which can incorporate locally determined disclosure and staff consents. You have the ability to configure NoahFace to deliver on that. Another issue is retention and destruction policies. How long are you supposed to keep data for? How long can you keep data for? NoahFace can be configured to delete data within 24 hours and hold it for up to 7 years. So depending on what your client requires, you can configure it that way. There's, in some states, real issues on security and people's private information. NoahFace does not, will not, has never, ever used any data for anything other than the specific purpose of identifying an individual in order to enable them to participate in the use of NoahFace, i.e. clock in and clock out on Workforce Ready. So we don't sell anything to anyone, but so we have a clear line on that. And then as far as security policies and storage, etc., we have detailed information on our website as far as all of this, as well as privacy, security, etc. So I just wanted to say this document exists. It's useful. It could be useful for you just to be aware of it. It could be useful for you to share with your client or your prospect. Next thing, you probably received an email from me in the last week or so just to outline the fact that the Irish company Allegion is leaving the US market. And as a result, these Handpunch and Handkey products are not going to be supported going forward. What some resellers have told us is that they see this as a great opportunity to take the current products that they may have in their clients' hands of Handkey and Handpunch and replace it with a more upgraded biometric solution, which is NoahFace. And so I can go into that in more detail if you require it. But the bottom line is they're leaving the market, and in this notification, you can get details of key dates and things like that. But they're leaving in the middle of this year. And the last little FYI from me, and there's no new news here. This is just a little bit of a reminder because I had a conversation with a reseller last week, and he was asking me about, okay, so how much flexibility do we have on pricing, etc. And I said, look, you have total flexibility on pricing. What we are going to do is we are going to bill you on a wholesale per user per month, per device per month basis. You could choose to take that wholesale pricing and just mark it up visibly in a percentage way with your client, meaning we charge you per user per month and per device per month, and you charge your client per user per month, per device per month. Another option, if your client wanted a simpler solution, is you could just obviously do the math and roll up the per device fee into the per user fee and just charge them a larger per user per month fee, but that would incorporate all the charges for the device fees. And then another even simpler thing is say, you know what, we'll take care of your payroll for you, and our monthly fees are this, or our quarterly fees are that, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just telling you the obvious, but just reminding something with a conversation I had. Just take our wholesale prices and make them into a billing situation that makes sense for your company and for your client. So the good news is, it's my last slide. Thank you so much for attending. I hope this is useful. Just a reminder, we're always here to help. Everybody has Jonathan's contact information. You've got my contact information. We plan to do this on the third Tuesday of every month. So the next one is on April the 20th. And just as things, as we get closer to that date, we'll work out exactly what the agenda is that we're planning to cover. So thanks for joining us. And we'll send you an email with a link to the video if you need it, as well as that privacy and data information. Okay.